shame me about going to Thailand. You can't shame me about going to Africa or Portugal or Morocco.
Right.
Them days are over. They're over.
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of black women don't believe the fat meat is greasy. But I'll tell you what, you'll find out for sure. Yes, I am from North Carolina. I am country, and I embrace all that. So,
I'm gonna use that. Damn, the fat meat is greasy, but you know what? It goes back. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. As you all know in recent news, PJ Brown announced that he was going to get rid of his girlfriend. And whether he got rid of her or she got rid of him, somewhere down the line, PJ Washington and or his girlfriend did not believe that the fat meat is greasy. The fat meat is greasy is a Southern colloquial term that I've often used, me and my man Eric Spencer from BMO, to more or less solidify or more or less contextualize behaviors in a lot of our women and how those behaviors hinder them from getting the outcomes that they so desire. The fat meat is greasy is a term that you will be hard pressed to more or less hear in this space as I start to say that, because it's something that needs to be addressed. So hearing the word fat meat is greasy, it's more or less a catchy term that I decided to use in this space as an original to more or less convey the negativity of behaviors of modern women and how men need to be on the lookout. If PJ Washington had known what his worth was, PJ Washington could have got in contact with my man E. Spence, and we could have more or less showed him or more or less conveyed to him that he could have got a better and more suitable woman that could have given him the outcome that he wanted. But unfortunately, because PJ Washington, like so many other men in America, don't know what their worth is, they limit themselves to women that don't have their best interests at heart. And because PJ Washington did not believe that the fat meat is greasy, PJ Washington is about to experience outcomes that are going to be detrimental to his long-term success. Brittany Renner, our IG model, is the woman that PJ Washington actually got involved with. And I'm telling you guys, you will be remiss to more or less find out or see that at some point, perhaps, because he did not understand 2 of the 7 principles of male optimization, which are female psychology and world travel, that at some point Brittany Renner is going to try to get money out of this young man that's going to hold him renderless, which in essence will cause him to have what's called a schema affliction. I told you guys that many people in our communities suffer from some form of mental unawareness. And because of that, they have things like cognitive distortions, cognitive dissonance, but also they have situations of having low self-worth, which more or less minimizes the outcomes that they so desire. A man such as PJ Washington, if he really wanted to, could have got a superior woman to Brittany Renner. And it appears that the young man, which he appears to be a good young man, it appears that he limited himself based only on temporary gains. One of the key virtues to becoming a man is learning how to discipline yourself, learning how to understand that there's better on the other side with time and age. And Brittany Renner appears to be a character that's caught up in her own vainglory. And therefore, one must ask themselves the question, will that vainglory cause PJ Washington to be in a state of perplexity? And will that vainglory cause PJ Washington to be in a state of despair? I've always told guys that putting yourself first in your best interest is very important to becoming an optimized male. And as a clinical therapist, I want to give you guys the opportunity to learn how to master that by taking some of the concepts in this space that we're dealing with and blending it with clinical concepts. If you want to get input on how to not be 704 by a term that I was unaware of that a lot of the young kids call a 304, because I used to ask myself the question, what is a 304? But it makes sense now. PJ Washington got 704 by a 304 because PJ Washington did not know what his worth was. 704 means he was dethroned in the Queen City, which is Charlotte, where he plays basketball at, as I'm a Tar Heel. And growing up in the Tar Heel state, the Hornets are an up-and-coming team. But the truth is, what Brittany Washington calls PJ Washington, Brittany Renner calls PJ Washington to be dethroned or dethroned in a manner that's going to cause him irreparable moving on. What Brittany Renner calls PJ Washington to lose out on practice time. What Brittany Renner calls PJ Washington to lose out on contract opportunities. What Brittany Renner disrupt PJ Washington's ability to focus on himself because now he has a child in the picture. And we know once she has a woman has a child sometime, unfortunately, in America, then she has all the power. When you look at this situation, it appears that PJ Washington was an unconscious simp. An unconscious simp simply means to sacrifice important or sacrifice or supplementing irrational male patterns. It appears that PJ Washington, like a lot of men, think that women like Brittany Renner that are caught up in the IG game for vainglory can actually be wholesome women once you decide to make them your girlfriend. But unfortunately, the attention continues to precipitate. And because of that precipitation, now, unfortunately, PJ Washington, because he was an unconscious simp, will more or less suffer the wrath of a woman that appears not to really care for him, but more or less care for her own self. And listen, young men, the young guys that are listening, listen, I want you guys to once again contact me at the kosherclinician@gmail.com. Contact me at kosherclinician@gmail.com. I'm going to give you guys some non-diagnostic consultations on how to deal with situations like this. I'm going to give you some clinical concepts using knowledge from the red pill to help reduce your chances of becoming pigeonholed by women like Brittany Renner. There's an old saying that says, when you know better, you will do better. But unfortunately, with some men, you can give them the advice and they still will become 704 like PJ Washington. All throughout the news and all throughout the world, many men are getting dethroned, or more or less getting dethroned or more or less demoted in their homes, towns, or cities because they get with unsavory women that do not have their best interests. But you can reduce that by putting yourself first. You can reduce that by disciplining yourself to understand that sex is something temporary, but it can have long-term consequences. And that's why I decided to do the Manhood Chronicles and the Kosher Clinician to give young men and women outcomes that are more or less suitable to helping them become better people. So I want you guys to think about the outcomes associated with PJ Washington and Brittany Renner. And I want you to ask yourself the question, what could PJ Washington have done differently that would have given him better outcomes than the outcomes that he's going to have to do for the next 18 years? And I want you guys to remember this. If it ain't 7, it ain't kosher. If it ain't kosher, it ain't right. PJ Washington got 704 by what the young people call a 304 in his city of Charlotte. And I want you guys to ask yourself the questions, what would the outcomes be once again moving forward? Be well and don't become 704 like PJ Washington.